Previously on Nerd Punches Nerd.
Right, well, also the other thing is that Zack Snyder is only producing, he's not directing.
Right.
Indeed. Thank God for that.
Right.
Hello and welcome to Nerd Punches Nerd, the only podcast where a bunch of nerds pretend to physically fight over minor pop culture minutia. I'm here, and I'm Jeremy, and I'm here with Mr. Benji and special guest Sam. Say hello,
Sam,
guys.
welcome back.
Hello. Thank you again for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
Right.
And should we make him a regular, Jeremy?
A recurring guest?
He's kind of like it's kind of like the Steve Martin and John Goodman.
For like Saturday Night Live?
Yeah.
Well, today is our semi-annual Star Wars podcast. And,
remember? You missed our previous.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, yes. So, today we're going to be talking about the most recent Star Wars movie, depending on when you listen to this podcast, which is Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, or, Right Before 4, or 3.5, or 3.95, or whatever you want to call it, but that's what it is. And to get things rolling today, we're going to have a little fun, if you will, and use the Star Wars name generator to come up with names for each of us. So, I guess I'll start. My Star Wars name is Atendor Baham, a foolish young hero from the Aparo sector. Alright, and Benj, what's your name?
My name is Breaks Okedpa, and I am a Padawan learner, of course, from Kola 4.
That's pretty great.
Nice.
I should tell you, the first time I typed it in, I put in my name wrong. I typed Pada D at the end of my first name by accident, and it gave me an even better name, which is Vindi Miatrix Azapeta, a clone from Deveron.
Nice.
Well, we all know that that's what you are. So.
Well, that's true.
Nice.
Alright, so let's get into a little story about a lovely lady and her gang of miscreants, and talk about Rogue One. So, as we all know, Rogue One was directed by Gareth Edwards, who previously had done a movie called Godzilla, which I know none of you have seen, and I wasn't such a fan of.
This was the book of Bryan Cranston one, right?
Yeah, that's right. I assume you guys haven't seen it, right?
Because Jeremy, you and I saw the Roland Emmerich one, right? Back in the day.
Oh wow, that was a long time ago. I mean, yes, I guess his version was better than that, but I found it kind of boring.
Bryan Cranston's, or Gareth Edwards was.
Yeah, exactly. And, this movie is, it's done by Lucasfilm, which is, again, owned by Walt Disney, so it's one of their new strategies.
Wait, sorry. Gareth Edwards.
Yeah.
Did he also directed Safety Not Guaranteed, right?
Safety Not... What? No.
No?
No, that's like that weird guy that I don't like.
Maybe it's a different Star Wars director.
Oh, that's correct. Colin Trevorrow.
Colin Trevorrow. Okay, so I gotta mix up Colin Trevorrow.
Well, he's the one I'm most worried about, even though he's a Jew, because he did Safety Not Guaranteed, which I wasn't such a fan of. Then he did Jurassic World, which I don't 100% blame him for, but it wasn't good.
Okay.
And then he's doing Episode 9.
Right. Oh, 9. Oh, okay. Yeah. So he's like way ahead.
Yeah, that's right. So
okay, that's like down the line.
It may not even. Ways. It may not be. Since Carrie Fisher passed away, I don't even know what's going to happen with that. But
I assume they'll still make it.
Well, they're still going to make it. I just don't know what's the change. Anyway, Ryan Johnson. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Ryan?
Ryan. He did Looper.
Right.
And he's the one who's doing 8. Well, he already did 8. I should say he did it. It's just in post-production now.
I haven't seen Looper, but I've heard really good things about it.
Oh, surprised! Yeah, it's a very good movie.
Yeah, Looper's good. He did Looper. He did The Brothers Bloom, which is like a fun sort of like con artist heist movie. and he did Brick, which is also a really fun movie. Highly recommend, actually. Jeremy, you've seen Brick, right?
Yeah, but I mean, so we're getting a little off track though. I mean, my point about Gareth Edwards is that, from my perspective, I wasn't like particularly impressed by anything. And this is the kind of movie that, even though it has, people associated with it, writers or whatever, how much did they actually do? I don't know. I mean, these are all by committee just because of how complicated they are.
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars is just going to be no matter what.
So just because you might have talented people behind the director, or technically, that doesn't really mean anything. I mean,
right.
You look at like the two guys. It says like the story is by two guys, John Knoll and Gary Whitta.
Okay.
And these aren't the screenwriters, but John Knoll is basically a guy who is known not for writing, but for being a visual effects supervisor. And Gary Whitta is a screenwriter, but here, let me tell you the last two movies he did: The Book of Eli and After Earth. That terrible M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Okay.
Which was also, in fairness, co-written by Shyamalan.
So are you perhaps hinting at and suggesting a little conspiracy theory that there was a ghostwriter to this entire movie? Is that what you're saying, Jeremy?
A ghostwriter? No. Like a committee of writers? Yes.
That is more likely than just one sole person.
I mean, I'm sure they thought about it for a while to try to come up with because if you look at the cast, it's a very diverse cast.
Right.
So, I'm sure that was a part of the decision, and they're like, okay, here's what we got to do. We want to make, we want to have a lead, and we want to have a secondary lead, and then we want to have like a lead villain, and then like they had their own decisions about what to do. I mean, it's probably a long time coming for how the production was done. I mean, who knows exactly how early it was?
So do you think, Jeremy, the fact that this movie is not part of like the main series, but is like kind of its own thing, do you think that means that it's likely to be more the result of like just a committee, like a mass of people, or more that like the like the head Star Wars guys like kind of left it alone and just like let a small number of people kind of put it together?
Well, I think it's not as committee run as Force Awakens was, but but yes, I do, and here's why. Because it's the first off-brand one, and I think they felt like they were probably trying to play it a little safe. Not completely safe, but, more safe because it's the first one. Like, think about it this way. Other than Iron Man itself, what is the first Marvel movie really to take a risk? What do you think? Because for me...
Well, I would say both Captain America and Thor were risky.
In a matter of speaking, but I don't really... I mean, a lot of that was just sort of... But they played on very...
You mean that's in Marvel Studios?
Yeah, Marvel Studios. Because I really feel like the Guardians of the Galaxy movie is probably the riskiest in terms of how much... because it was such an unknown property.
You said first.
Okay.
I think that's what Sam was responding to. But I think you're right. I think
they were all risky. I think Iron Man was risky.
Well, I said other than Iron Man.
It was.
Iron Man was the first one I think was risky, but that's not. I'm not saying other than Iron Man.
No, I mean, I think they were all risky for different reasons. But I get what you're saying about Guardians being like a very unknown property and kind of a weird property, like a tough sell.
The point of that is that because they had already had a bunch of successes, including by that point, Avengers, they could afford to have a misfire, which they didn't. Right.
So actually, speaking on that, bringing it back to Star Wars. So, I mean, as long as we're talking about theories, I have this kind of theory that I don't think is the craziest theory, and I don't know really how to prove it or what aspects of it could be true or not true. But I feel like in a general sense. And we've talked about this before, both privately and also on the podcast. It's just obviously with Force Awakens, that as much as as people want to pick apart this and that with it, they had an extremely tough job. They had such a unique situation where they had to make it different enough in some senses from the prequels, which left a sour taste in almost everyone's mouth, kind of like Saint Anger did for Metallica fans, but even worse. And then but at the same time, they couldn't just alienate everyone, with having too risky of a movie or something too edgy or too different. So they, towed the line and they stayed on a certain course to at least do kind of some table setting and as we said, we all think it worked. The Force Awakens worked, and that since they did that and had that going on, they could kind of test out to a degree having like a darker, more edgy and more risky movie that they took some more chances with in Rogue One, so that worst comes to worst, if people didn't like it, it wasn't part of the official, Star Wars timeline in the same way. The Star Wars movies, one of the episodes. Yeah. Do you agree with that? That that's possibly how they did it? And then, now that they tested it, they know that they can possibly go in further episodes, perhaps go a little darker. Maybe not the same way as Rogue One did, but
darker. I really.
But no, I mean this was more
like.
Different.
For me,
this was an updated style.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Force Awakens was not particularly updated.
This movie was very on point in a lot of ways.
It was great. We haven't gotten to talk about that, but
it was connective tissue. When I talk about risk, I often think about things that people like unknowns.
Yeah.
Weird stuff.
Yeah.
When they talk about having a Han Solo movie, with Miller and Lord starring, Donald Glover, I feel like that's probably going to do well because everyone already knew Han Solo.
But it is a risk in Rogue One, the way how they did things, how they had they took away a lot of the silliness and campiness. Like it was there, but not a lot, and that is a risk because that's how Star Wars is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Benji, so I kind of agree with you and also disagree with you. Like in the sense that I think you're right that the fact that Rogue One is kind of its own thing allowed them to try out like a different tone. The movie is darker. It is like, a little more grim, a little less campy, than most of the other Star Wars movies. But at the same time, I don't think that necessarily indicates anything about the direction that the franchise is going to go in. Because I think the main Star Wars movies are going to try to keep to that consistent tone, of what they've been. Certainly, the Force Awakens, I think, they're gonna try to keep that going for the main series. But now that they have these spin-offs, they can do different things with the spin-offs. They can make a Rogue One spin-off. They can make a, young Han Solo spin-off. I don't know. They've been talking about, I'm not sure what other ones, are they talking about doing a Boba Fett movie or something like that?
There's been all sorts of rumors. I mean, that one I'm not really interested in. But,
if it's good, it's good. I mean,
yeah,
it could end up being a good movie.
It's good, but, I mean, yeah, well, that's how I feel about every movie. But I'm just saying the concept doesn't interest me. Han Solo to me is a more interesting character, and seeing his origins is a little bit more interesting to me. Boba Fett, I feel, is such a fan wank character already that he kind of pisses me off. I mean, I think I told you at one point I was just trying to learn more about him because people were obsessed with him. So I was just like, what's the deal with this guy? Why does everyone love him? And I looked at something and it's like, oh yeah, one time he fought, Darth Vader to a standstill. And I was like, what? No, he didn't.
Is it like, do you feel like it's, sorry, finish up.
Well, this was
nobody who watched Rogue One could possibly think that that's true. After that scene with Darth Vader just wrecking a hallway filled with soldiers.
Oh my god.
Alright, well I guess if you just want to jump into that,
well, we should. I mean, I think that the thing is with Boba Fett, we probably shouldn't spend too much time on Boba Fett, but I get the sense Star Wars is kind of it's a more silly. They'll have powerful moments. This is my impression. Okay, I'm sure some Star Wars fans will hate me for saying this, but it's not as serious. It's not as it's more Disney-ish in a sense. Before it got to Disney, in the sense of it's just not as gritty, and it's not as it's more, it got, as I said, even more of a silly or fun tone, So I'm saying I feel like something with Boba Fett, he's the badass. Besides the villains, he's like one of the badass, mysterious guys in the universe. It's just, I feel like if you're into other stuff and you know like other edgier universes or more mature things or complex things, you're like, Boba Fett, I guess he's cool, but like I don't know, that's my feeling about it. So like I think he's kind of cool, but like, you know, he doesn't compare with a lot of other things that I think have more complexity to them.
Well, he basically has no personality.
Well, he did have that scene in, was it Revenge of the Sith? With his father Jenga, they like threw that in there.
You mean where he was a little kid?
The scene is like in the rain or whatever.
Yeah, where they had it played by that like Maori guy, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I'm Django Fett. Let's go punch. Let's go. I'm gonna go punch a Komodo dragon. Oh, I mean, a Star Wars Komodo dragon.
Let me get the boomerang.
Saved it. I saved it, guys. I saved the reference.
Thanks. No, I mean, actually, I think it could be fun to see like a movie centered on him as like sort of like an anti-hero, like collecting bounties and just like, you know, doing whatever he's doing, like for like, you know, as like a mercenary, as like a hired gun. That could be fun. But there's whatever. It's a big universe. There's a lot of stories, you know, that they could tell. Maybe they'll like, you know, some of the books went and followed, like, you know, there were like a whole series of books about Rogue Squadron. You know, and like, you know, maybe they'll like make a movie about Rogue Squadron or something.
Jeremy
you know, that would be like.
Jeremy used to spend hours and hours pored over these Star Wars books. He couldn't get enough of it. He couldn't put it down.
Benji's trolling me.
I tried to be like, Jeremy, let's play some Final Fantasy VI. And he's like, that's okay. But these Star Wars books, man, they really got me.
Yep, that's, it's funny how exactly the opposite.
I remember a cover, this is true, a cover book of like Luke fucking fighting someone with a lightsaber. It was Luke,
but
right?
I couldn't get through like 5 pages of that book.
Okay.
I've actually read a number of the books.
I have
the old ones,
read
not anything recent, but
yeah, I've read some of like the Old Republic stuff, and some of them weren't so bad. And I've read some of the novelizations of the movies.
Right. Because R.A. Salvatore did the Attack of the Clones one, which I read parts of, which was kind of cool.
Well, I mean,
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the books that were written like in the 90s, you know, before
Jeremy's
the prequels
favorite universe, the Star Wars literature. That's we all know this.
It's called the Star Wars Expanded Universe, Benji. Or actually, it's actually not called that anymore because now it's called Star Wars Legends, but it used to be called the Star Wars Expanded Universe.
Well, Jeremy just prefers it over any of the original canon. You know, that's his thing. So
of course, obviously,
we can just leave it at that.
Yeah,
anyway.
And I do actually have one friend who is such a fan of the Expanded Universe that when Disney said that they're putting it all in Legends, he said, I refuse to pay money to see any new Star Wars movies.
Wow.
Yep. So
you really showed them.
Yep, well, he hasn't seen 7 or Rogue One or anything like that.
Well, there has been a thing, wasn't there, like, it was like a show, like the Clone Wars
I'm just imagining these, like, Disney executives being like, damn you, Chad! I assume your friend's name is Chad.
Obviously.
Well, it's not, but you're close. Yeah, it's actually Chaddington.
Yes.
Chaddington.
Hey, we got news. There's a Chaddington. He said he ain't gonna watch Star Wars.
Well, Chad, he's always grinding my gears.
We got all right. Send out the fixer. Oh, you mean Braddington? Yeah.
It looks like we're having a really good, in-depth, robust conversation.
Well, I blame you, Benji, for your stupid lies about Rogue One. So, getting back to the actual topic, I want to talk a little bit about the production stuff. How much do you know about the production issues that they've had? Because remember, we were talking about it being made by committee.
So I just read something that said that there were, like, at some point during the production there were reshoots. They, like, changed up some things in the story. I know there's at least one famous image from the trailer that wasn't actually in the movie, But even I said I read this article, but I didn't, the article didn't really have much information. It didn't really say much about what the changes were. Only that I think originally the characters, the heroes were supposed to actually, survive and,
in an earlier draft of the script,
yeah.
some of them did. But apparently, Kathleen Kennedy, who's the honcho over there, was saying, yeah, you can kill them off because it doesn't, so that was a change. But they didn't shoot a version like that. There were changes and tweaks and things that happened, and that just happens with a lot of stuff. And Gareth Edwards has said that during filming, they did some changes on the fly to the script because as things were going along, they felt like, oh, actually, this is playing a little bit better. And that happens all the time with movies where you change it.
Well, that's not uncommon. That's
right. Now, we do know that the final battle on the surface was very different in a lot of ways. Exactly how is unclear. However, there's a video that was showing that there's basically 46 shots from the trailer that are not in the movie.
Okay, so that I did not watch that video. I'm sure it's riveting.
Well, it was just sort of interesting because I didn't realize it was that many, and some of them are more you see her running on the beach, which she never did, or there was actually one that I remembered from the trailer where she's up on the balcony. Oh, by the way, spoilers for the movie. Where she's up on the balcony and a TIE fighter is rising up. And that never happened.
That image, so I saw that trailer and I forgot about it. And then I was reading this article and they showed that, a GIF of that image. And I was like, oh, right, that was in the trailer. And then it never happened in the movie. Which is a really cool shot.
Nope.
But I don't know. I guess it's because I didn't watch the trailer over and over again, so I didn't really remember much about it.
I
didn't really notice that stuff.
I didn't watch it incessantly, but that I didn't really notice most of the other shots that were missing. But that one was because I noticed oh, that's cool, and when it was over, it's that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Although I will say there's one thing I know that I didn't realize they changed from the trailer to the movie, which is kind of funny, which is that in the movie, Saul Guerrero, Forrest Whitaker's character, does he have hair or is he shaved?
He has hair. Oh, you mean like facial hair?
In the movie, no. He has hair. He has hair on his head, and I think he has a beard too.
Yeah, in the trailer he's bald.
Oh wow.
I totally had forgotten that, but I rewatched the trailer.
You know what? It's fine. It's better if it's all consistent like that, but the movie is what counts.
The trailer is the trailer. Who cares if it's wrong or whatever?
Yeah.
It's just you wonder about, the changes that were made and, if that could have made a different or better movie or whatever.
What's surprising is not that they made changes to the movie, because that happens all the time. What's surprising, I think, is that they actually made a trailer based on certain expectation for how the movie was going to look and what seems, what shots were going to be in it, and then they changed it afterwards. That seems like a kind of a late stage to be tinkering with, what are in theory your most, critical and striking shots that you're going to have.
I can tell you trailers they come pretty early in the production process. So basically, they're not even always. Sometimes they're done before the movie's even finished shooting, and a lot of times they farm it out to a company that hasn't even seen the whole movie, just to come up with sort of a kind of a sizzle reel of sorts. I told you about all the crap that happened with Suicide Squad, where they basically hired a trailer company to edit it, and that led to a lot of the problems. Not all of them, but
it's kind of surprising because I think we should probably move on to we're talking about the movie itself, but it's kind of I think it's kind of surprising because I thought the movie was pretty tight. It didn't seem like there's a bunch of stuff thrown together. At least to my eye, it really seemed like that's why I was even surprised when I saw that there was more than one person credited for the story and all that stuff, because it seemed pretty consistent and tight and compelling. I would say I really enjoyed it. So kudos to them.
So so we have your opinion. You liked it a lot. You think it was better than Force Awakens, right? And what about you, Tim? What's your overall opinion?
overall, I liked it a lot. It's interesting in comparing it to Force Awakens. I think it's definitely a better movie, although in some ways I feel like The Force Awakens was more fun. Like I remember walking out of the theater after The Force Awakens being like, that was fun. And then like I thought about the movie afterwards and I was like, but there were a lot of things that were stupid. And like Rogue One, you know, there weren't like as many things that were stupid or didn't make sense. Like it really hangs together pretty well, as a movie. And also like, you know, like it's just got a better plot in general. And I think that it's like, you know, the acting is very good. And you know, there isn't like sort of any like waste or like, you know, The Force Awakens had like some weird stuff going on. But I didn't walk out of the theater with that same feeling of joy of like, this was fun. This was, you know, like it was more like, no, I mean, I walked out and I was like, that was good. Like it was a good movie and I enjoyed it.
Not to the Darth. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
And like I said, I think that it was, as a movie, it was better than The Force Awakens.
Right.
But I'm still trying to like sort of sort out my feelings for it, or like, you know, what I liked, what I didn't like. There were things that were good. One of the things I didn't like so much was that like the character development wasn't so great. There were a lot of characters, you know, many of the characters really didn't get much time to like sort of like, you know, for us to like get to know them. Although, you know, some of them were really good. Also, like I couldn't remember anybody's name.
Yeah.
Like none of the characters' names, I just didn't get them.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I did like it. I do think it's better than Force Awakens, and I think that it is probably, at worst, the fourth best Star Wars movie of the 8 now that have been released in theaters.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've sort of gone back and forth a little bit about this. Like, right after I saw it, I thought it was a better movie than Force Awakens. Now I've kind of changed my mind about it. Because, you know, even with a lot of the issues that I had with Force Awakens, I felt more, you know, at the end of that. Like, I was more emotionally connected to it than I was to Rogue One. Rogue One sort of seems to me like, you know, I like it, but it seems more like an average Star Wars movie in a lot of ways. And I know that's kind of like an unfair thing to say for some people, but I have to say, like, you know, when you compare it to all of the movies, you know, there wasn't any particular moment in it where I was like, this is the thing that's going to be like making it memorable for life for me. You know, the prequels had that in negative ways, but even the first three movies had those types of moments, and even in The Force Awakens, it did too.
What moment in The Force Awakens would you say does that for you?
The end.
Okay.
The final scene.
There's a few moments in the Force Awakens. The lightsaber battle between Rey and
I'm not talking about strong moments. I'm talking about something that's gonna like, you know, that I had like a real emotional response to.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, of course, the thing is, it's very interesting because there's a lot of negative reactions that I've seen online about the movie. A lot of people complaining. They basically say, so the complaints I see are the characters aren't well thought out. The story isn't really like, it doesn't really connect together, and then the, you know, plot doesn't really make sense. Those are the complaints that I've heard. Now,
I don't understand this. Like, I mean, I kind of understand it, but it's kind of like they I feel like, as I said, like they updated Star Wars for now. I mean, maybe some people don't want that, so that it's more, you could say in a certain sense, relatable. It's like, what would it be like if they were under an empire? Like, for real? You know, what would it actually take for them to get to the stage? And in a sense, you know, that's actually points to a reality in life and war and all that they all had to sacrifice their lives. I mean, everyone, until the very end. especially with that amazing Star Wars Darth Vader scene. Which, by the way, that is going to be a remembered canon scene here. I'm just going to say that is going to be a remembered Star Wars scene, which I think is kind of
all right. Well, here
indisputable. But
well, okay. So here's a question about that Darth Vader thing, because I feel like there's a lot of interpretations of that. Do you feel like we are meant to be like, oh, that's so amazing, it's so badass? Or do you feel like it should be taken like a horror movie?
I think they were clearly, like, they didn't need to have it in the movie. It wasn't necessary. It could have wrapped it up, and I thought it was just this amazing cherry on top that really was awesome. And I think it was, in a sense, like some sort of fan servicey thing, like it was sort of like a gift to the fans, but I think it was done really, really, really well. And so, and I think that's why, like people have been talking about it because everyone has wanted to see how destructive Darth Vader is and how powerful he is. And maybe people felt that way when the original movies came out, like the first, episodes 4 through 6, maybe it really did come across more so. But by now, it's more of like, he's just this badass character and we all know it, but he was even still sort of in some sense, I think, maybe perhaps taken in sort of a silly way. And then you see in this, that like, this is what he does. This is how he destroys and inspires fear and terror in everyone who opposes him.
Right, but you haven't really answered my question, which is, are we meant to take it like, this is a really cool, badass thing, or are we supposed to take it like it's a horror thing? You saying it's fan service doesn't mean positive or negative. I agree that there's a kind of thing that's fan service, but that doesn't. What I'm saying is, like, how are we supposed to take it? Are we supposed to be like, yeah, get him, Darth, or are we supposed to be like, this is like, because like how are we supposed? Because because let me give you an example. Someone said what if we had seen, let's just give you here's a good example. Like, let's say the movie Lincoln. And at the end of Lincoln, like, everyone's talking, and like, Robert E. Lee comes in, and he starts like shooting up all these guys. He's like killing all these Union soldiers, like, and it's like he's really effective at killing them. Are you gonna be like, man, that Robert E. Lee shooting scene was badass? Or but
I understand
that's kind of a weird comparison, but
yeah, it's just kind of weird. I understand what this person is saying. This hilarious thing this person is saying, where becomes Abraham Lincoln vampire hunter and stuff. Mm-hmm. He gets his crossbow out, that has ballots, the ballots for ending slavery. He like shoots those out of his crossbow. But anyway, I meant to take it. I think I understand what you're saying. I think it's just it's kind of like. I think one of the reasons it was amazing is because it did both. Because Darth Vader is kind of that character that people, he's one of those beloved villains. So maybe they went more overboard with how powerful he was, or showing certain things to try to like get you excited for it. But it's still, since it was horrific, I think still worked. I mean, it was a more complex moment. Like, and I think that speaks to the strength of it. Because also the other people that the protagonist had died anyway. So it was like, is there anything else to root for? And it's like, oh, they still haven't gotten it, haven't delivered the thing yet. And this does give an opportunity to showcase Darth Vader. So I mean, they didn't need to have Darth Vader there, in my opinion. But I think it was just. I think the horror, to answer your question, the horror served the wanting to see the thing with Darth Vader, and also fit within the scope and the theme of the movie.
Yeah, I agree with Benji. I think that it really is both horrifying and, I guess I would use the word thrilling, but like thrilling and like in like a horrifying way, because you're like,
awesome.
Because you're like, oh, that was awesome, but at the same time, like Benji said, like at this point in the movie, our heroes are dead. Like, it's just this, like, they're trying to get this, like, tape, like passed through to, like, to where it can be safe, and like, the heroes are dead, so it's just these random mooks, who are like just doing the last little bit, and then like out comes like the final boss, and it's Darth Vader, and it's and he comes out and he's just kicking the shit out of everybody. And it is horrifying because you're like, oh my god, like they have to get away from him. He's like so terrifying, and like they got to get that tape, and that's like the last exciting moments of the movie. But at the same time, it's also like we love Darth Vader because he's a great villain, and like all great villains, ultimately are going to be loved for like how great they are at being villains, and like you. Right. So there is that element of like kind of almost rooting for them because we're so excited, to see them. So I think it did kind of accomplish all of those things, but I don't think it was intended just to be like exciting and to show like, oh, it's awesome, Darth Vader is killing people. Like I think it was supposed to be horrifying, and like that's why like the way it was shot, the lights go out, it's dark, it's like this crowded hallway, it has like a claustrophobic kind of feel to it. Like it's shot like a horror movie, and I think they meant it to have a horror feel, and it's supposed to be that last little horrifying, moment when you think like, oh, are they gonna get it? Are they gonna get away? And then they do get away, and like, even though he kills everyone, but like they still manage to like, to get the plans out, and it's like that last little bit of like, like sacrifice and and like death and pain and suffering, but like we did it, we accomplished the mission, even though everyone died. Just barely. Yes. Did it, we won.
People literally have to sacrifice their lives to do it. More people than they even intended.
And I do think that Darth Vader is there kind of like as like the final boss. Like you think that like the Death Star is the final boss, but no, it's Darth Vader. He's the final boss.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And here's actually another argument for why it was necessary. Actually, I just thought of this. I think even later that night after I saw it, I was just so jazzed up from it, and so I just looked up, the opening scene from A New Hope, and it literally leaves off there. That's where it is.
That's true. It does. I don't think I think there's some things that they're a little muddled with that, but in general, I think
I think that A New Hope is supposed to be like not immediately after, but like a couple of days later or something, right? Maybe a week later.
Well, if it's right away, then it kind of is like, well, then Leia has no excuse because it's like they saw you leave. But if it says like, oh, well, we tracked down because we're pretty sure it's you. We have sources. Right. That's
but he had been pursuing. The whole point is he tried to. If it's fitting the story, he tried to get the disc or whatever, and he's chasing them in the Star Destroyer, and Leia's on the ship. So like that's more of my point. And I think just maybe before we move on from this, like I think maybe a good analogy for how you can feel about it is kind of actually how the sack of King's Landing, spoilers for Game of Thrones season 2, how the sack of King's Landing was done in the show, which I think was one of their best episodes. And remember, you kind of root for both sides.
All right. Well, let me just remind you how Star Wars: A New Hope starts, which is blah 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 blah. Darth Vader is on the ship, and one of the officers comes over to him. He's like, "The Death Star plans are not on the main computer. Where are those transmissions you intercepted? This is a consular ship. We're on a diplomatic mission. If this is a consular ship, where is the ambassador?" And obviously, that's Leia. So that's sort of where it starts. So there are the intercepted transmissions is sort of what they're talking about. Now, what that means, blibbity blah, who knows? Wireless transmissions were basically only introduced in this movie, and they didn't seem to go that far. So I don't know how good that technology actually is in the Star Wars universe. It's kind of like an interesting thing. But we saw like hard drives for the first time also.
Right.
So that was kind of...
Well, that also speaks to, and then that probably speaks to that, like, of just how much they were underdogs, like, hardware.
What did you think of the score? John Williams didn't do it.
Right. It was an homage to the score. It wasn't as good. It wasn't as good as the original score. But...
I thought it was a little distracting the way that the score was, like, almost Star Wars, but not quite. Like, I kind of thought they should have, like, either just have the Star Wars score or, like, just have a totally different score. Like, but it doesn't make sense to, like, kind of like
Okay.
tease us
But
with
let me give you a little
the like
context.
pseudo Star Wars score.
Let me give you a little context. The guy who came on to do it was Michael Giacchino, and he was replacing someone else. So here is when Michael Giacchino started working on it. September of 2016. And he had 1.5 months to do it. To do the entire sound, to do the entire score.
Okay.
And basically he had, if you want to think of another movie he'd been in, he was just finishing Doctor Strange.
Okay.
So he finished that, and then he's like, hey, we need you to do this Star Wars movie.
What? I don't understand. What happened to the other guy?
Contract disputes. Basically.
The other guy? What do you mean the other guy?
No, Jeremy said he was replacing somebody else.
Oh, right. Sorry, I zoned out.
Because like they just got him at the last minute. Like that's.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, I think, Michael Giacchino has done some really great work at times. He's also done some work too, but like he did the new Star Trek movies, and he did it because he did a lot of work with J.J. Abrams. But he also did Up. Like if you know, remember the music at the beginning of Up that makes you kind of cry? So he did that.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe saying the month and a half thing, like maybe that just, like I don't think the movie was bad. I know what you're saying, Sam. Not movie. I mean music. I don't think the music's bad.
No, I mean like mostly the music was fine, and like I didn't really notice it one way or the other. But like just those moments where you like think you're gonna get the Star Wars, like that famous Star Wars, score, and then it's like not quite that.
Oh, you mean that little tease, especially what they did at the beginning.
Yeah, especially at the beginning.
Yeah, I was kind of like, okay, I guess I see what you're doing. I mean, they did have the theme. They did have the Darth Vader theme.
Well, okay, yeah, well that's true. So we already kind of talked about Darth Vader, but I do want to ask you guys, what did you think of his dad joke, where he says, "I hope you guys don't choke on your aspirations."
Yeah.
Right. That was a bit much, but whatever. It was just one
I hope
line.
you're. Hey, was that funny? Are you clutching your dark sides? Come on, right? Come on.
Yeah, that was.
I mean, listen, it was kind of dumb, but I don't really care.
Well, because I think there's a funny moment in the in the original stuff.
Yeah.
And basically, the funny moment that I remember is where basically there's a whole thing with one of the admirals that is replaced, and he's like, "I'm just gonna go apologize to Lord Vader personally," and then you see him dead on the floor, and he's like, "Apology accepted." Yeah, so that was pretty good, but
yeah. And then Darth Vader said, "Remember when I told you I would kill you last? I lied."
Is that from Commando?
Yes, I believe it is.
All right, well, let me ask you guys another question. So in this movie, it's basically the first of all the Star Wars movies where we only had evil Jedis, which is specifically just one. And so we had no actual Jedis in it. The closest is the Force-sensitive type people, like, Donnie Yen's character, Chirrut.
Right.
Imwe.
Right.
It's a terrible name, but whatever, that's Star Wars. And he's kind of an interesting guy, but he's part of the Guardians of the Wills, which was a reference I didn't really remember that I'd heard before. But basically, they're they're part of the group that are essentially involved with sort of guarding this old historical Jedi temple, and they kind of have an essentially spiritual belief in the Force and Jedi stuff.
Okay, I thought he was kind of a Jedi in training. They just didn't have official Jedi in that time to teach him. That's what I thought it was, but. Okay.
Yeah, I mean...
So I understood his character a little differently. I mean, I just wanted to say, in general about having a Star Wars movie without Jedi, I think that was kind of a departure for the franchise. It's the first movie that doesn't have, a Jedi character. And it's just showing us, mostly, the lay people, the rebels who are just, ordinary. And you did have this one guy, Donnie Yen's, what's his name? Chirrut Imwe?
Yeah.
but he clearly wasn't a Jedi, and he clearly wasn't trained by a Jedi. The way that I understood, his character was that he's a guy who, like, he's a religious character who like belongs to this religion that like worships the Force, and they have some familiarity with like Jedi concepts, but it seems like it's like a step or two removed from the actual Jedi.
Yeah.
And that like, his beliefs are like sort of, they're more like based out of like, books and like stories and things that people have told about the Jedi, and he's heard, these things, and like it's not clear whether like there are other, like it's a larger religion or it's just like his own individual beliefs. The movie kind of implied that like he kind of made up his own thing, which I thought was really cool.
They did, but
the idea that like, that there are people in the Star Wars universe who like remember the Jedi, know about the Force, and it's like this religion to them, but they don't quite know like what the Jedi are really about, but they know a little bit, and so they like, but he's like clearly this like spiritual guy, who believes in the Force, who like, worships the Force, and probably himself is it's implied that he himself is Force sensitive, but it's not even relevant like whether he has any like Force powers or not to him. Like what he cares about is the fact that he trusts in the Force, in a way that like we haven't really seen any characters,
right,
in the Star Wars movies that are like really, like religious like that, like faithful, right. And I really liked his character, and the way that I thought that was really realistic, that there would be people like that in the Star Wars universe, who just like, who are trying to like carry on the old traditions, even though these traditions are being lost, and they're trying to like, he's trying to, that's what it is. He's trying to like reconstruct some kind of, Jedi tradition or Force tradition,
but I think you're
on his own that's like meaningful to him. Okay. What am I missing?
Which is, in the movie, this Jeddah thing, is like an ancient Jedi temple that hasn't been, no one's been there for a while, but the Empire destroyed it at some relatively recent time, maybe in the past couple of years. It's not clear exactly when. And these Guardians of the Wills were protectors of the temple. They were not Jedi, but they were, because it's like a historical thing. And his other friend, Baze Malbus, which I know is awful, and his name is the problem.
Yet another terrible name.
Well, one of the issues with this movie is that like some of the characters don't get named enough. So, and those two are some of them. Like they're barely mentioned.
They barely mention their names. The pilot also, the defector pilot, they like barely ever mention his name.
Right. So, this guy was also one of the Guardians, but he became an assassin later. So, this guy was a Guardian, and then he became sort of an assassin kind of guy, like sort of like, our old friend Django Fett of sorts.
Right.
He, even though he was still friends, he was an assassin guy. Now, it's possible that maybe he had some Force sensitivity too because of how good he was at shooting people. It's possible. But he's a guy who was a Guardian but lost faith after the temple was destroyed. That is the implication of the movie, and that at the end of the movie, he's kind of regaining that faith.
Okay.
Because that's why he says, if you remember the whole thing at the end where he's like the Force is with me type of thing. He's
saying so
that,
I didn't really pick up that he also had been one of these Guardians.
Yeah, I didn't either. That makes sense.
This is not supplemental material. This was mentioned in the movie.
Okay, well, I just
mentioned.
Whatever.
It seems to have gone over. I think there's something.
They're mentioned when they're mentioned together. They say when they like say, "Hey, those guys are Guardians of the Wills" type thing.
Oh yeah. I vaguely remember that. Well, I thought it was a good thing in the movie, because piggybacking off what you're saying, Sam, before about there would be people like that in the universe. I think the good thing is there was this theme of like faith and hope. Definitely, they literally said it in the movie of just like, in order for this to happen, in order to make any of this work, you just have to have faith. Like they said hope, but they also could have just said the word faith. That was there. And
well, they said a lot of times, trust the Force.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Well, the way, that's what I thought was so great about that guy's performance. The guy, what Imwe was his name? Whatever his name is. The blind guy.
Chirrut.
Sure.
Yeah. I think
who's played by Donnie Yen.
Yeah. I mean, he did such a good job with it. And when he repeats the phrase, I'm one with the Force is with me, especially that first time, it actually sounds how very religious people sound when they're repeating mantras. Almost to kind of a like, either you could say fanatical or crazy. He didn't seem too crazy, but he was definitely doing it with a lot of feeling, and he sounded real the way he was doing it. It didn't sound like he was actually. Right. What was so genius about it was the way he did it didn't sound like all of a sudden he's conjuring something calmly. It sounded like he was just with that little bit of hope that he was trying to make it happen. Just will it happen.
To me, it felt like he was like reaching for something, exactly. That he wasn't sure he was going to be able to grasp, but he was just like trying, to like reach out for it. And also, I liked that the other characters did seem to think that he was a little crazy, like in the sense that like they're like not entirely comfortable with him, but but that was one of the nice things about the movie was it showed like a lot of different kind of people all kind of like getting together for different reasons, but they're all on the same side because they're all opposed to the Empire.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that's true. Donnie Yen is pretty great. He's in his 50s and he's kind of like a.
Oh wow.
He's a master of like several martial arts, and also MMA as well.
Mm.
Yeah, so he's a pretty.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's pretty
his
awesome.
moves, his choreography was incredible. Like, Jeremy, you and I have spoken about this, but doing fight choreography well in movies to make it actually feel like it matters, and not just something that's like a function of just this is just something that happens in the movie to actually make it part of it. Part of the structure of the movie in a real way, something that's like its own thing, is hard to do. And we talked before about how like both kind of Phantom Menace, especially the Matrix, were like trailblazers at the time for how fight choreography was. Then it was copied a lot. And then we talked about how Daredevil and Jessica Jones in a way too have been great in terms of bringing this sort of grittiness and realness to it. But it kind of went back the other way, but in a new, fresh way. The way he was jumping around, like he made it look so cool. The way
but he wasn't doing like leaps and crap,
Right.
So this was all like because part of it is because he actually knows how to do choreography. So I sent you a little photo, which is him bulking up recently. After, because apparently he lost weight, like muscle mass for Rogue One, so he could like be like a smaller fighter. I sent you a little link.
Oh wow, he's jacked.
So this is like this is like 2 months ago or something.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. How old is he? 50 something?
53. Yeah.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah. So.
While we're all just looking at how hot he looks.
I have never looked that good. So when I'm 53, yeah, I'm not going to be anything close to that.
Please try out for Rogue 3 when that's
Yeah. Well, so speaking of the two Asian guys, there's a lot of possibilities that they were brought on because they want to have more stuff in the Chinese market.
Right.
But, whatever. My feeling is as long as it's not like a kind of stupid pandering, I don't have a problem with it.
So that doesn't bother me at all because their characters were good characters, the actors are good actors, and like there should be Asian people in the Star Wars universe because like it's a big universe and there's a lot of there's aliens and stuff and like there should be different kinds of humans also. And like we don't see a lot of Asians in movies, in Hollywood movies generally. So like I thought it was great that this movie, it passes the Asian Bechdel test. Which like no Hollywood movies do.
Yeah.
And that was pretty cool. And I don't if they did it so the movie would do better in China, God bless them.
Right. I mean, there's definitely a dearth of female characters, but at least they have diversity in ethnicities.
Well, the good thing about having a science fiction sort of fantasy movie not in any known world is that you can make it completely, multiracial and multigender, you could say too. Like you don't need to have those. You don't need to have the same restraints. So I mean, yeah,
right.
Bombs away.
There's a lot of talk about those two guys. There's sort of, the classic way to interpret it is that they have a bromance. They're old friends, But the internet immediately jumped on it and said, there's gay subtext there. So there are different ways to interpret this, because one way is that it was intended to have gay subtext by the writers of the movie, and that's it. Another one is that the writers didn't, but the actors kind of secretly thought it, which is actually something that happened in Force Awakens. Where basically,
Really?
Yeah, Oscar Isaac said that he acted as though he was attracted to Finn.
Oh.
But that's the subtext that was not part of the script. Like, J.J. Abrams never told him that. They just said that's the way I played it. But that's different. There's also the possibility that there was more, and it was more explicit, but they cut it out. There's another possibility. They probably will never say, or at least not for years, if that is true. Or there's no plan at all. So what do you think? I mean,
my feelings on this is that I don't know if the writers intended it. Probably not. When I watched the movie, it didn't occur to me at the time, but then I saw some some talk about it afterwards, and I looked back on it and I was like, yeah, I can see that. Because so they were two characters, they were close, they had kind of a bromance, but there's also it's more than just a bromance, there's a definite tenderness between their characters. And this devotion to each other, that feels, like it could be, romantic, kind of like an old, two old lovers who, have been together for a long time, and, it felt genuine to me. I feel like that's 100% valid way of perceiving the movie. Was that intended? I have no idea, but it's definitely, the subtext is definitely there.
But
even if it wasn't intended.
This comes from sort of a classic thing, which is if you have, a guy and a girl in a movie and they have a close relationship, people just assume there's sexual tension.
Right.
Well, this sort of arises from the same feeling. Well, why can't there be sexual tension that's not heterosexual? And
it's not that there. It's not.
Yeah, but it didn't. I mean, it didn't feel like tension to me. It felt like
a history.
Affection,
I think
affection.
It's the same point, though. If you have two, oh, hello, oh, it's been a while. Do you feel like, oh, these guys have a history? Where you don't really assume that necessarily for homosexual relationships, even though it's still a possibility.
I mean, I feel like, I think what you're saying, maybe the actors did think of that in a sense, there's always that possibility, and I can see that sort of thing. Maybe, and I think Sam was saying about tenderness is something there. But, the way, I think people are I could be wrong. Definitely, I could see where I could be proven wrong, but I think people are kind of inserting that in, because I got the sense that they had been together for a while as sort of, besides just friends, that they had probably been in some sort of battles and life and death situations with each other many times, kind of, that they were their comrade in arms. The thing, you could say the thing about tenderness, but it was pretty clear, I think, that Frodo and Sam, for instance, were not actually a homosexual couple. It was just, you can add that in, you could say that was there, and they had a lot of tenderness towards each other, but it was just, that was kind of the style and feel of the movie. They could have gay characters in Star Wars, and there's no reason why they shouldn't, but I think I don't think this is really an example of it, at least from the writing perspective. It just really seemed like they were comrade in arms who really cared about each other.
Right. Well, okay.
So.
Well, let's move on. Speaking of sexual chemistry, I was talking to someone, a friend of mine, who said that that she was sort of more lukewarm about the movie, but her main thing that she really liked was Diego Luna, because she thinks he's hot.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's sort of that's sort of an interesting question, which is, do we just automatically fetishize all the leads in these movies?
I think Diego Luna was supposed to be sexy in this movie. Yeah. He's, whatever. He's a very popular actor to begin with. He's kind of a rising star right now. It's my impression. Jeremy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's one of these up and coming guys.
Yeah, I'd say that.
and he has this like sexy accent, and he's like kind of that like cool badass who like, you know, he doesn't care about anything, and like, you know, there's that like bad boy rebel kind of persona that I think people find, you know, he's definitely like kind of like the Han Solo of this movie.
Clearly.
So I think the filmmakers like wanted him to be sexy. You know, even though they didn't like specifically like sexualize him. You know, I mean, there are no scenes of him like hitting on women or whatever, but
like
walking around
maintenance with his shirt off or whatever.
Walking around without his shirt on. But
do you think,
but I don't think it's at all, you know, like against what the filmmakers intended, that people are like being like, oh, Diego Luna, he's so sexy, you know. I mean, like, it would be one thing if he was like the bad guy, if they were like, oh, that, you know, director Krennic is so sexy, like, I feel like that would be like a little weird.
Director Krennic.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I don't know. A lot of people really do like Ben Mendelsohn. I mean, people think he's an attractive guy, yeah. But I mean, you know, Felicity Jones, I think, is often considered to be attractive. Although I've also heard people say she has like a snaggletooth because people, you know, are assholes. Well, I'm not going to share you a picture in the chat, but you know, there's, you know, a lot of like. You know, there was sort of like an interesting thought I had, which is like, at the end, are they gonna like kiss at the end? And they didn't.
Right. That was interesting how they didn't. Yeah. What
do you think? Do you feel like that was like a missed opportunity, the correct opportunity? Like, do you feel like, you know, it was better that, you know, they didn't actually have a romantic thing even as they were dying at the end?
Oh, Benji, you go ahead.
I mean, you know, I think they could have gone either way, and I don't think it would have ruined it if they had a kiss before they died. I understand why they didn't. I think was fine, and in some sense, it's more realistic because at that time, where they're dealing with just obviously the fear, and then also just you know, their lives coming to an end, and just the drama of that moment, they might not be thinking of anything romantic if they weren't already romantically involved. I mean, you know, if it was like, you know, a couple that lived with each other, you know, for 40 years, then maybe they would have a last romantic moment. But since they hadn't, I think that was the thing, that it was enough. And, you know, I think that worked. I don't think it was a problem. But again, if they did have a kiss, I think it would have been fine.
Yeah. So I agree. I thought it was really nice, like, what they did, because it kind of felt like they had a little chemistry, and like there was this kind of implication that like if we weren't like fighting for our lives and like, you know, like just desperate to like just complete our mission, and like now we're like, if we weren't gonna like die in like 5 seconds, like maybe there would be a romance here. Like you could kind of tell that like it was like going in that direction, but like at the same time, they didn't really have an opportunity to have a romance, and like that's okay, because like they were busy, you know, saving the world, and like that's more important, and like, you know, they were kind of like businesslike about it, but at the same time, you know, you did get this sense of like there was like potential there, you know, that like maybe it could have developed into something if they had lived, and like I thought that was a lot nicer than like shoehorning an actual romance into the movie, which like really would have been like, you know, just felt like it was like forced, you know, because there wasn't time, and there wasn't, and like that's not what their priorities would have been in that moment anyway, you know, like not every movie has to have a romance, but it was nice that like they just kind of like nodded in that direction, you know, that's, I like that.
And the truth is that it does actually speak to the movie what was going on, and that the whole theme of the movie is part of the thing is that the empire, as happens in, you know, authoritarian or dictatorship regimes, where people's personal lives and family lives get severely interrupted, you know, and some people don't get to have this or that. I mean, you could probably see both of them may have had, I think it's likely both of them have had at least little flings here and there, but perhaps they had been killed or just didn't work out because there was all this stuff going on. Because also they showed that people were also being interrogated on the street, so probably people were made to disappear and stuff like that. So, you know, and also, you know, again, if they got too close, then that would also have been a liability, you know, made them more vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I'm probably okay with either way. I mean, it's just that I think it was probably the right decision from the tone that they'd already done.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it. But, sort of like moving on from there, though, as we all know, Star Wars started as the most sexist movies of all time. I mean, male leads, pretty terrible. And so obviously, what did they have to do? Well, they had to become, whatever the word for man-hating is. So that's why, you had a female lead for Force Awakens, and now
The word
a female lead.
Jeremy,
again.
the word is misandrous.
Misandrous, right, there we go.
Misandrous is a fake word. But the point is,
That's why they made the new Death Star look like a vagina. That's why.
No, you got a point actually, but it actually looks like a clitoris. I'm kidding.
Right.
That's what Galen was putting in. He's like, let me put in a weakness. You just got to know how to treat it right, Luke.
You know what I mean? A weakness. A broad, right?
Yeah, that's right. Obi-Wan's like,
God.
use the Force, Luke, if you know what I mean. Well, I was reading an interesting article which is sort of positing that even though the Jedi were forbidden to love, it didn't mean they were necessarily forbidden to, per se.
Luke inside Death Star.
Well, yeah,
meaning
that
they
never stopped Luke with Mara Jade.
Right, so maybe,
Sorry, that's an expanded universe joke for you. I know you didn't get it.
That is a great name for a euphemism for vagina, by the way, the Death Star. That's just a hilarious thing to say. Anyway, keep going.
Well, so do you feel like, but really there are two leads in this movie. And, one of them is Jin, and
right.
one of them is Cassian.
Right. And you could even say really that Jin is like the main lead.
The main. Well,
Cassian is kind of like secondary to her.
Right, because we see sort of two threads throughout the movie, primarily. Obviously, we do see some of the other characters, but other guys aren't as interesting. But, we start from her as a kid, and then later on we cut to Cassian shooting someone. So they're kind of like the two people. But because we start with Jin, it's kind of like her story for the most part. So how does she compare as a protagonist to Rey from the last movie? What do you think?
I mean, I liked her better, but I think just the writing was better. But Rey, I think, has a lot more potential. I think Rey has a lot more potential for growth. Because Jin didn't necessarily grow that much. But Rey, I mean, first of all, Rey's younger, right?
Yes.
And we're gonna see stuff with Rey. I mean, it's gonna be part of her arc. So I'm more excited about Rey as a character than I was about Jin. Actually, the interesting thing is Jin wasn't really my favorite part of the movie. I liked how Felicity Jones played her, and I liked the character, but she I don't think was really the most exciting part of the movie.
So it's interesting. I mean, I liked Rey a lot, but I think I like Jin more because I think Jin is a more interesting character. Jin starts from a place of, she's not really interested in what she's kind of doing her own thing, and she kind of, I mean, like, Benji, you said she doesn't really, like, grow or change, but I don't think that's true. Like, she goes from being somebody who, like, wants nothing to do with the rebellion to, like, when she finds out, that her father actually has been, like, working against the Empire and that she has an opportunity to, to like, help, like, basically redeem his legacy, she turns around and is like, no, we have to do this, like, and she's, like, trying to push everyone else
to
go on this mission when the leaders of the Rebel Alliance are like, no, it's too risky, we're not going to commit any forces to it. And she was a much more proactive character. Rey, I think, is kind of more of a cipher. Like, we don't really get to see so much of, like, what's going on with Rey, like, inside her head. And also, she's, I think, a bit more passive than Jin is. She's not really that same kind of, like, take charge, like, this is what I want, this is, and I need you guys to like get on board with me, kind of character. I mean, Rey was a good character, and like you said, she does have a lot of potential for growth, and I'm very excited to see her in the next movie, with Luke. But just in these two movies, I think I enjoyed Jin's character more than Rey.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I guess it's sort of like, an interesting way to sort of get into sort of like the final piece of this. We've sort of talked about all our different general feelings, but I sort of want to get into what's probably the most controversial part, which is the fake versions of actors. Peter Cushing and Carrie Fisher were reconstructed. Basically, neither one was playing themselves. In Peter Cushing's case, he had already passed away, 20 years ago.
And he still looked like it.
Well, in the prequels, and I know this is a horrible comparison, but the person who played Mon Mothma in a deleted scene of the prequel actually came back to play Mon Mothma in this movie.
Right. Which is fine.
Not only that, but Jimmy Smits, who was Bail Organa from the prequels, also came back.
Right.
He's back. And the guy, there's this guy named Guy Henry, who basically, they gave him some extra little makeup to make him look more like a younger Peter Cushing in the prequels. He has a scene like where you just kind of see him from the side talking to Vader and the Emperor at the end of the movie. It's sort of like, it's not really a big thing. But in this one, he was the stand-in. They did some motion capture stuff on his face and basically put Peter Cushing on top of it.
Right.
And similar for Carrie Fisher, they had some young, actress that they did the same thing for her.
Right.
And apparently it was very expensive. But do you feel like it was a successful experiment? I do know for some people that they did not know he had died.
Right.
And they thought that was just him.
So
for me, it was very obvious that it was a fake person, but
here's my response. I knew that Peter Cushing, that they had like done a digital effect to put him into the movie. I had like heard about that beforehand, and as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh yeah, that looks like a special effect. It doesn't look like a real person. But it was okay. It was fine. I don't know. I mean, like. It was like a tiny bit distracting, but it didn't really bother me. I had not heard that they like kind of recreated a young Carrie Fisher in the movie until I saw it. And when I saw it, I guess because it was like a very short scene, it's like the shot is like just for like a few seconds.
Yeah,
and the way they lit it or whatever, like it didn't look fake to me. It looked real. It looked like she was really there. But I've heard that people who went into the movie and didn't know that it was a special effect for Peter Cushing didn't realize that he was, that it was a digital effect. They thought they like just didn't even realize. They didn't notice. They thought it was a real actor. So I guess like if you don't realize that going in, then maybe it actually does look real. Anyway, my point is just that like it was noticeable and a little distracting for me for Peter Cushing, but like for Carrie Fisher, like I did not think anything looked bad or out of the ordinary, and I thought it was great, and I was like really impressed with that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Carrie Fisher thing, I knew that was digital, and I thought it was pretty good. Also, it was short, and it was at a perfect moment, so you didn't have to like linger on it. So it was good timing. Just kind of like Jeremy, Westworld sort of spoilers when they have for Westworld, maybe I shouldn't say anything because Sam hasn't.
No, well, they do have a thing where they basically make an actor and they have like a flashback and they show a younger version of that actor. Right.
And that was okay. Remember, they didn't zoom in on that actor's face.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, because Tarkin here had like a lot of scenes.
Yeah.
Like
Well, so the interesting thing is, here's interesting. I thought it was the real actor, and I didn't necessarily have an issue with it, but it is interesting because I don't say it was subconsciously. It wasn't like. Obviously, I didn't notice it, but it was like somewhere in the middle of my consciousness. I did register that something was weird, but I didn't know it was CGI. And then when I found out later, I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's what it was that was bugging me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't even bugging me. It just
That
like,
was off or whatever?
yeah, I remember thinking something off. It didn't ruin it, but I was like, I guess his face is like, I mean, I don't know. It was just, it was like, I wasn't really consciously thinking about his face, but it's just something registered, kind of strangely.
All right. Well,
one thing that I've seen that I thought was kind of weird is that there's been some discussion after since the movie came out about the ethics of using digital technology to recreate actors, or in Carrie Fisher's fate, in her case, because she was still alive at the time, but to like recreate a young version of her. And like some people were saying that they thought it was like ethically questionable, but I don't really understand that, because in Carrie Fisher's case, they got her permission to do it. And for Peter Cushing, they got permission from his estate to do it. So like, if you're getting permission from people, then like, it doesn't really seem like there's any sort of ethical issue. But I don't know, maybe Jeremy, maybe you can explain like why that was like a thing.
I think
there's also a law in America that you are not allowed to use someone's face for 70 years after they die. Like, you can't use like their
likeness, you mean?
Their likeness at all.
You can't profit from their likeness?
Like, a person, there's an idea that, like, right now, who knows how this will change in the future, but right now the idea is, like, the 70 years is sort of, like, they become a historical figure, which is why it's, like, say, okay to have, like, FDR or whoever. You don't have to worry about asking permission to use his likeness.
Right.
Or, even like Cary Grant, similar case.
Right.
He was an actor, but it's okay to just have his, just show what he looks like. Now, this is like the 70-year thing. So it's a little bit tricky though, because people sort of are always worried, like, well, what happens when, like, people just want to make themselves look younger, and computers are good enough to do that. And then, because, I don't know, they already can in a lot of ways. People already use computers to, even just that we don't notice, to clean up things all the time. And then there's like a question about, like, well, what if an actor says they don't want to be in a movie? Well, right now that's illegal, at least in this country.
Right.
So there's still that. But I think it just makes people feel a little weird, because, when someone's died and they use their image, I don't think people have an ethical problem, with the Carrie Fisher thing, at least at the time. I think it was more with the Peter Cushing, because he had already passed away. It seems morbid.
I would be under the impression that people might have an issue with it because it's kind of making a commentary, not making a commentary, but it's like, if someone doesn't quote unquote look as good when they're older, something like that, that might be something offensive, and maybe some people are afraid. I don't know. This is kind of just like idea, like something I thought of, but like, maybe in the future people will, I don't know, they'll try to use an older actress, and they'll try to say, like, oh, we're going to redo her face to make her look hot in this movie, and then people will talk about the pressure from media and all that stuff to on women to look younger, things like that. I felt like that's where it's from.
And don't get me wrong, like, there was a controversy about the Ghost in the Shell movie with Scarlett Johansson, where like they used some digital effect to it was like this was like a test or something, but they if I'm remembering the story right, I think they used a digital effect to make her look Asian.
Yes.
Even though Scarlett Johansson obviously is not Asian. And then it was like this big scandal, and everybody was like, "Oh, you can't do this. This is ridiculous," and whatever. And like that, I get like why that's really wrong, and people should not be doing that. But this didn't seem to be so bad to me. But I guess I mean, from some of the reasons that you mentioned, I do kind of get it.
Okay. Well, right now we've talked a little bit over the length of the movie, so I feel like it's a good time to wrap it up, because we could keep going, but we probably shouldn't.
Okay.
All right.
So just to finish things off, what spin-off do you want to see of this movie? And since I know Sam finds that idea absurd, I'll just give him my spin-off, which is when people recover the memory of the Alan Tudyk droid, which we didn't mention.
Oh, we didn't even talk about Alan Tudyk.
Man. Let me just tell you something, Sam, just that I also tell Benji, which is that he's basically like the Disney secret weapon now. He's been in a whole basically since Wreck-It Ralph. He's been in every single one of the Disney animated movies.
Yeah.
Which is great.
He played the evil guy in Wreck-It Ralph. He played Duke Wesselton in Frozen and Duke Weaselton in Zootopia.
In Zootopia, yeah.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. He was also in Moana also. And, of course, now he's in this new Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
He's great.
He is
He's
fantastic.
phenomenal. And what's great is that
he's great in
all
everything.
of those are different voices as well.
And the tone of the movie wasn't silly, and he was still hilarious in it. In Rogue One, he was just great. he's like, do you want to know the chances of her shooting you? They're high.
Right.
They're very
So, my spin-off, which couldn't be a real movie, but I just like the idea of like the further adventures of K whatever. I mean, they called him K constantly, so that's how I think of him. But that, I mean, I just want to, I want to see more. You know, he was my favorite character.
Yeah.
And then Chirrut Imwe, I would like to see the young versions of him. Like, you know, his adventures.
Are you going to digitally remaster the Space Journey? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. No, I just, you know, basically,
he actually does not need it.
Just use his natural hair color, and then you're fine. Have him just play the same character.
Yeah.
As opposed to giving him, because they grade him up for the movie, but his hair color isn't actually great in real life.
Well, that would be a great spin-off, him and Kay. Wouldn't that be a great?
No, that's right. Wait, how did he get reprogrammed? That's how we got to learn.
Yeah.
Right.
So a prequel to the prequel, Rogue Zero.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
And you know what's great about him too? It really could be a comedy because remember how he's just so bad at pretending to be an Empire droid, like.
Yeah. Well, no, that was great, and that was clearly a reference to the first Star Wars movie too. When Han Solo is terrible at being a stormtrooper.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're great. How are you?
Yes.
So, Benj, your final word?
You know, I'm very happy that they're doing which is sort of a spin-off. They're doing the Han Solo thing that Tim, what's his name? Phil Lord and Tim,
Miller.
Tim Miller, right. I'm glad that they're doing it because they're awesome.
It's Christopher Miller, but
Christopher Lord. Right. But the thing about it is, you know, I'm looking forward to that, but this is just sort of apropos of this sort of idea, which is that I waited after the movie ended. I was like, should I wait for the credits? And if there's gonna be afterwards, and then I looked it up quickly on my phone, like, are there credits afterwards? And they said well, what happens afterwards is A New Hope, so you know what's going to happen.
No, that's right. I think I sent you that little funny thing. It was like, here's some leaked photos from the sequel.
Right.
Yeah.
It was all Star Wars New Hope.
Right.
Like, I loved, and there was a great comment. It was like, looks pretty good. All right, Sam, your final word.
My final word is no spinoffs.
Okay.
This movie, everyone dies at the end. It was ballsy. I mean, this is a Disney Star Wars movie, and everyone dies at the end, and it's amazing, and it was ballsy, and it was perfect, and this movie ended perfectly, and I understand what Jeremy was saying about, I'd like to see more of these characters. Maybe we do a prequel to the prequel, but that gets to be a little silly at a certain point. Tell us different stories in the Star Wars. This was a good story, and I enjoyed it, and now it's over. So now tell me another one. A different story. That's what I want to see.
So you don't have to kill off all the characters in every movie, though.
Well, no.
In this the Han Solo prequel, I would be a little confused if they killed Han Solo at the end.
Yes, if Han and Chewie died in that movie, it wouldn't make sense. That would be odd.
It would be. I feel like it might happen that they do. I mean, I feel like, and it might not be good. I feel like they might do Luke growing up movie. You know what I mean? They might
As a
somehow.
kid?
Yeah, they might somehow.
That would be very boring.
I know, but
Isn't at some point his life kind of sucked?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
we could learn all about the details of moisture farming.
Guys, if they start now, in 18 years, they can have a Luke Skywalker Boyhood movie, just film it in real time.
Yes.
It sounds terrible, but that's only because it would be.
We could learn all about moisture farming and drinking blue milk.
Well, maybe he meets Kay. Maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe he learns
okay.
to enjoy it.
And we could watch him, shoot womp rats in his speeder.
Yeah. All right.
With his boring uncle.
I think that'll wrap it up for us. Thanks for coming out, guys, and nerd you later.
All right. Nerd you later.